The silence of lost love. Julia and Mark had a storybook beginning. From the moment they met, their connection felt effortless. They could talk for hours about anything and everything. Their dates were filled with laughter, their shared dreams painted in vivid detail during lazy Sunday afternoons. Julia had never felt so certain about someone, and Mark's devotion reassured her that he felt the same. But one day, everything began to change. It wasn't abrupt, it was gradual. The subtle shifts in Mark's behavior were almost imperceptible at first. His good morning texts, once filled with affection, became sparse. The long, thoughtful conversations they used to have now felt like a checklist of pleasantries. Julia found herself asking questions he answered with one-word replies. She told herself not to panic. Relationships go through phases, she reminded herself. It's normal. But the unease gnawed at her. The Mark she knew, the man who used to light up when she walked into the room, was retreating into himself. The weight of distance. One evening, as Julia sat at the dinner table, her eyes lingered on the empty seat across from her. Mark had sent a text saying he'd be working late. Again. She stared at the meal she prepared, her appetite disappearing with every passing second. In the quiet of their apartment, Julia allowed herself to feel the ache she had been suppressing. The loneliness was deafening. She missed him, not just his physical presence, but the emotional connection they once shared. When Mark finally came home, the tension was palpable. He greeted her with a quick kiss on the forehead before retreating to the bedroom. Julia watched him go, her heart sinking. "Mark," she called out, her voice trembling. He paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "Yeah? Are we okay?" The silence that followed was excruciating. Finally, he replied, "I'm just tired, Julia. Can we talk later?" But later never came. The spiral of doubt. Over the next few weeks, Julia found herself trapped in a cycle of doubt and overthinking. She analyzed every interaction, searching for clues. Had she done something wrong? Was there someone else? She confided in her best friend, Mia, during a coffee date. "I don't understand," Julia said, stirring her latte absent-mindedly. "He used to be so present, so attentive. Now it feels like I'm invisible." Mia frowned. "Have you tried asking him directly?" "I have," Julia said, her voice breaking. "But he just shuts down. It's like he's avoiding me." Mia reached across the table, squeezing Julia's hand. "Sometimes, when people pull away, it has nothing to do with us. It could be something he's dealing with internally. But why won't he talk to me about it?" Julia asked, tears welling in her eyes. "We're supposed to be a team." Mia hesitated. "Not everyone knows how to express their feelings, Julia. Maybe he doesn't know how to let you in." Julia nodded, but the uncertainty lingered. The breaking point. One Friday night, after yet another week of Mark's emotional absence, Julia decided she couldn't take it anymore. She waited for him to come home, determined to get answers. When Mark walked through the door, his exhaustion was evident. Julia stood in the living room, her arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said firmly. Mark sighed, setting down his bag. "Julia, I'm really not in the mood." "I don't care if you're in the mood, Mark," she interrupted, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. You've been distant for months. I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't even know why." Mark stared at her, his expression unreadable. "It's not that simple," he finally said. "Then make it simple," Julia shot back. "Tell me what's going on. Tell me what I did wrong." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. For a moment, Mark said nothing. Then, to her surprise, his shoulders slumped, and he sank onto the couch. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. "The confession." Mark's voice was barely above a whisper as he began to explain. He talked about the pressure he'd been feeling at work, the growing responsibilities that made him feel like he was constantly on the verge of failure. He spoke about unresolved issues with his family, old wounds that had been reopened during a recent argument with his father. "I've been drowning, Julia," he admitted, his eyes filled with a vulnerability she hadn't seen in months. "And I didn't know how to tell you because I didn't want you to see me like this. I didn't want you to think I was weak." Julia's heart ached as she listened. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Mark," she said softly, "why didn't you trust me enough to share this with me?" "Because I didn't want to burden you," he replied. "You deserve someone who has it all together, not someone who's falling apart." Julia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to have it all together, Mark. That's not what love is about. Love is about being there for each other, even when things aren't perfect." The road to healing. Mark's confession was the turning point they both needed. For the first time in months, they had an honest conversation about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes. Julia expressed how his distance had made her feel, while Mark opened up about the shame and inadequacy he had been carrying. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, moments of silence, and even anger. But by the end of it, they both felt lighter. Over the next few weeks, they worked together to rebuild their relationship. Mark started seeing a therapist to address his stress and emotional struggles. Julia focused on creating a safe space where he felt comfortable sharing his feelings. They also made time for each other, setting aside one evening a week to reconnect without distractions. Slowly but surely, the distance between them began to shrink. The lesson learned. Looking back, Julia realized that Mark's silence hadn't been about her at all. It was a reflection of his internal battles, his fear of vulnerability, his struggle to navigate his emotions, and his misguided belief that he had to face everything alone. She learned that when someone who loves you deeply starts ignoring you, it doesn't always mean they've stopped caring. Sometimes, it's their way of coping with emotions they don't know how to express. Mark, too, learned a valuable lesson. He realized that love wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. It was about trusting someone enough to let them see your flaws and letting them love you anyway. A new beginning. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Mark turned to Julia and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Julia smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for letting me in." Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Julia and Mark, that was enough. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content. Thank you.